Thank you all very much. I would like to introduce today. I'm just thrilled that Jay Rotonnelli has joined us and is willing to present and share some of his experience. He is Vice President of Strategy and Development at Piscataqua Landscaping. Jay carries a New Hampshire supervisory pesticide license, serves on the New Hampshire Green Snow Pro Salt Symposium Planning Committee. He's on SIMA's education committee, and he holds the designation of advanced snow manager. If all that's not enough, he's also the host of the wonderful podcast Blizzard and Bloom, providing insights from the ice and green scene, which if you haven't checked it out yet, I highly, highly recommend. Welcome, Jay. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Amanda. Appreciate the introduction. Glad to be here. Glad to be a part of this. Always find a ton of value aligning myself with others, such as the folks here that have a passion for the industry and more importantly, how do we get better at what we do each and every day? So glad to be on.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Anything from your esteemed background that I did not cover? Maybe tell a little bit if some individuals aren't familiar with Piscataqua and where you're located in the world.
Sure. Piscataqua Landscaping, it's our 46th year in business. Started in Elliott, Maine, serving the seacoast of New Hampshire, southern Maine, northern Massachusetts. And then we've had a few acquisitions and tuck-ins up in the Lakes region of New Hampshire with a few locations, and most recently in Portland, Maine market, which we stretch up to Booth Bay Harbor. So we've had, again, some organic growth and some with the introduction of acquisitions and tuck-ins. So that's a little bit about our company. We're a 12-month a year company offering full commercial and residential services from design build to commercial snow removal.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. As always, guys, this is casual. I have some, pre-scripted questions and conversations I'm going to work through with Jay. But please raise your hand, come off mute, jump on, interrupt, drop it in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with. These interest groups are made for you to network and to be of benefit to you. So please participate and jump in with whatever you want. When I was thinking about topics and like where was I when I was in your role and what was I be doing this time of year? Okay, hopefully all renewals are out, or at least you have a really strong footing on all your renewals being out the door if they're not in yet, and focusing more on that outbound sales and starting to look for it. Jay, I'm sure you can talk about that transition a little bit, but maybe we start with route density if you want to start there. Just like when you're looking to plan your outbound sales, where do you start with? What's the first thing that you would consider? For me, it's route density. What would it be for you?
Yeah, really ditto. It's
Okay.
route density, and it's reaffirming your relationships with your existing clients, right? I mean, we should be following up with them, repeatedly throughout the winter season, but it's important to make sure that is a strong relationship going into the summer and the spring, because how quickly people can forget when you get into the months of August, September, October, right? When we have the heat. So it's important to strengthen those relationships and be open to, some criticism or critiquing, right? So if everybody says they nailed it 100% every time, every storm, they'd be lying to you, right? So it's all how you recover. We have our challenges, and then how do you make up? So building those and strengthen those relationships, and then thinking about density is super important.
For sure, for sure. And I think when I say route density, yes, like I have a piece of equipment parked here, the neighboring property makes the most logical sense. Absolutely. You're jockeying equipment around less travel time between job sites, more profit, less overhead, that kind of thing. But I also think it's important, Jay, and talking a little bit about the value of knowing your client, like knowing which market you're serving and who's your client. Like who do you want to be your client? How do you kind of qualify individuals
Sure.
to be a prospective client to yourself?
Sure. Well, I think we all know that not everyone values service, or they value it to a different degree, right? Um, so when we think about some of that, for us, we don't go out and just blanket propose on estimate everything. We think about, who's our client? Do they pay on time? Do they complain a lot? Is the facility fairly easy? Do we have good communication? There's all those things that come into play, right? And
Mhm.
that to me is the ideal client. The ones that aren't are the ones that will wait until the end and complain, and it's too late to, to adjust or make, recover for that, or the ones that drag you out for 120 days, 180 days. So um, those to us aren't the ideal clients. And when we think about density, back to that, Amanda, we're thinking
Yeah,
about what we already have in place for resources. So,
sure.
whether it's equipment or personnel, we're always very careful about capacities, and understanding, potentially what's available to us as we forecast out. I mean, after all these years, we're able to kind of forecast out what the next season might look like, and then what we're going to have for capacities and resources. And I'm talking from a staffing to equipment, all of that, and as well as from a financial standpoint, right? When you need to make the investment of equipment, you got to make sure you're steady on your feet and financially sound, to be able to go down that road. So those are some of the things we think about, when we think about the density, but also to your point, like who's really the valued customer and who's our customer. We service
Sure.
many different entities and many different demographics, in the residential and the commercial market. But when we think of it from a commercial perspective, we want to align ourselves with people that feel there's value there to, number one, make their properties look great and shine, make it
Mhm.
safe, most importantly, for not only their staff, but for their visitors, their clients, whoever it is. Um, and they don't want to be that person that's in the paper, or that there's pictures taken, or that there's slip and falls. So, when you start to align yourself with those folks and show the value, and when I think about all the folks here on the show today, we're all part of SIMA, and we've all, gone through this education process. We're all here to talk about how do we better ourselves, how do we better our businesses. And when you start looking at that, we not everyone's a good fit, right? So not every project or site out there is a good fit. There might be some that just go for the absolute lowest bid.
Mhm.
If you could make that work, then great. But most often that's not a good fit because they're setting the precedent, whereas maybe you should be setting the precedent as an industry expert.
For sure. Let's talk a little bit about the value of if you're in that business development role, you're in that outbound sales, getting clear communication and direction from upper management ownership with where they want to go. You mentioned equipment, right? Do you sell the job first or do you buy the equipment first? Always, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And I'm not so sure about, interest as much for this group at that discussion, but the value of partnering with operations and with ownership. So knowing what direction you want to go to focus your time. Because let's be honest, outbound sales can be exhausting and very time consuming if you're not strategic about it. So what are the good points that you kind of always connect your business development and your operations together so they can plan out what they're looking for?
Yeah, good question. We go after the low hanging fruit first, right? How do you fill in what makes the most sense? But um, when we think about that, we also have to consider the operations team, to your point, right? Because we're one team, we're one unit, we need to work together. Um, and it can be very tricky if you go out and sell a bunch of work and you haven't communicated and aligned yourself with the operations team, whether there's a manager or director there, you could be setting them up for failure and in turn setting yourself up for failure, right? So
Yep,
we
for
try to
sure.
have, when the season's over, like Dean is our snow manager here at Piscataqua. And we're having conversations. We've been having conversations for 2 months now. Our snow season just ended a couple weeks ago. So, the continual conversations of what's next, what does the growth look like for us? And even more importantly than that, it's forecasting out where do we want to be? What's our growth potential? And what are we planning for? Are we looking at an 8% growth rate, a 15%? And quite frankly, through COVID, there was we everyone did a lot of falsifications with that. It did a lot of crazy things to, financially and into service industries. So we're thinking about some of those things, but there's only so much time in a day. There's only so much time in a season, and you want to make sure that you're making the most out of your time when you're doing this outreach. And
Mhm.
part of what we're doing is we're trying to find folks that, like, we'll look back at this past season and say who really found some value in this and who were our great channel partners that we're doing business with. And did they appreciate it? And what were their expectations? And when you create that and reaffirm that, then, that's helping with your growth organically, right? Because they're talking to maybe another person that's in another market, but same company. So, when we're talking about some of that, we're thinking about some of our strategic partnerships, our channel partners, and
Mhm.
how we look at that. So, equipment, quite frankly, for us, it was pretty scary there a little bit during COVID. Equipment was tough to come by at times, but
Yeah.
um, we're looking at growth potential, and I mean the equipment market has rebounded. So we're not finding as many issues there with that. So we're
And I think that would vary greatly depending on where you're at in the country and what your access is to certain things as well too. To some extent, time of year, things like that. I just want to say welcome. I had a couple people jumped on recently. This is casual as always. Interrupt, raise hands, ask questions, drop in the chat. This is interactive. We want you to get out of it. So we appreciate it. Um, Jay, I used to a little bit different perspective. I worked for a large national company and then I worked for a single proprietor, like one branch location. And when I got into the business development role for that one branch, I took what I call, and some people laugh about this, as like the wedding list, the wedding invite approach. I come from a very big, loud Italian Catholic family. So when it was time to get married or any of the weddings we go to, it's this, well, how could you not invite your third cousin on the, but like, okay, mom, like, let's dial it
oh,
down a
that
little
with my
bit.
daughter right now, by the way.
There you go. So you're like, and I say this because you can't focus on everything all the time. You have to be strategic with where your outreach is as an outbound salesperson, especially if you're in a tighter market, especially if you're a single business developer for a one location shop. You really have to be strategic with that. So where are you going to devote your times to? Where are you going to outsource to? Who is your client? Who are you going after? And I would tier them, right? The job site right next door might be the most sense logistically, but they're a horrible client. They don't pay well. Gosh, they're a pain in the butt. I can't stand running into the food store because they just complain all the time. Or they're a national person that owns it and I can't even get a hold when I walk in the door. Nobody even knows like who the property manager is. So I can't get any footing. Like know your clients and focus on that. And I would have a tiered list, A, B, and C for who my priority was, right? My A-list people were individuals I wanted to make sure I was staying in touch with on a bi-weekly, if not weekly basis. I was familiar with what's going on. Like I really wanted their work. So I made sure that I kind of was an additional set of eyes and knew what was going on their site so I could jump on an opportunity, right? Waiting for that chance to kind of get in. Those C job sites, those ones that you kind of fill in late September because you have a little bit of an opening still, like you can kind of change your standards a little bit. But I would, tier that. And I encourage others to kind of have that perspective so they can really maximize their time and go after the clients that they want, the clients that the company wants to go after. The other thing I was always strategic about is the size of job sites, right? You want to grow by 10%. Is that 10% all on one massive job site that's going to take a huge deployment, or is it on a bunch of other smaller shops? I worked for a niche market where we served large HOAs. And it was great because we could do it, we did it well. So again, like this like niche market, soul sucking at times, but like a niche market. And we were about to take on the third really large one. And ownership was a little concerned, right? Like, okay, we just took a second one on last year. Maybe we should wait one more year before we really go after this job site hard and like let everybody settle in and fill in the gaps instead of year over year over year growth. But if you don't have that funnel, that trickle, that like ABC list of people, you're not going to be able to play and market to that. I don't know if you've ever had any experience with those types of things.
Yeah, it's interesting too, right? It's kind of cliche, but you can't be good at everything, as much as we want to be. So, I know there's some companies out there that only focus on HOAs. That's their
Mhm.
niche, right? And they're great at it, and that's what they do, and they're super successful. And then there's others who just focus on industrial or
Yep.
commercial, but they're set up. They understand the skill sets that are needed. They understand the resources that are needed. So certainly there's different markets, or different niches that you look for based on what you have available, right? And kind
For
of back
sure.
to what you were saying, we always have our eyes out in the winter. And there's one thing I want to say is just because you sold an account, or you renewed something in April of this year doesn't mean you shouldn't have boots on the ground come next December, January, February, and March. There's nothing worse than selling something and then never showing your face again, right? So there's something to be said that sure you'll have an operations manager, one or two or 10, doesn't matter. And they're out there, but people created that relationship with you. And I think it's super important for them to see you out on site, during those winter events. And while you're
Mhm.
out there at the same time, you can look around and see where maybe there are some failures that are happening. Maybe there's some folks that aren't, at our level that aren't involved, and it's a side job for them, right? It's just something to keep them busy. And we all know there's a lot of folks out there that are doing it. Um, but you take a look at some of those, and there's one thing that it all my years of this, it's integrity, right? We have a high level of integrity and we don't want to give it away. And when I say that, I mean we don't knock other contractors, right? That's not our approach. It doesn't do anybody any good. And if anything, it really jeopardizes your integrity. So, we'll look for things. And if we see something that maybe was a failure or that didn't look right, like, maybe the quality of work that we would do, we would maybe send a note or reach out or stop in later, when we get to the end of the winter or the spring, and say, hey, want to think about, next season? We're already planning for it. We'd love to have you on board. We think it might be a good fit. Is there a way we could, start a conversation and see if it might be a good fit for both of us? So we're taking advantage of some of those things, but
Mhm.
um, we're not doing it at the risk of ruining our integrity, and our professionalism.
Right. I always say, compliment in public, criticize in private kind of thing. Social media is not the place to, from my taste, to criticize and whatnot. But using those to your advantage. Someone messes up, job quality is poor, your team can do it better. That's your opportunity, right? That's your time. That's why you drive your route consistently so you can see what's going on and what else is happening. Jay, you mentioned, different calendars. Let's talk about how business development is 12 months long. It never ends. What's the importance of that?
You know, we work with a marketing company and we have for the past 16 years. And if there was one thing I learned from them, marketing doesn't stop. And marketing certainly doesn't stop when times are good, because that's when you should be planting the seeds and thinking about the future and what does, next year look like, or 18 months, 24 months, 36 months. Um, so when we're in the sales, kind of to my point earlier, you're always looking for different opportunities, right? Whether you're out at networking events or whether you're out during a storm and you got your hat and gloves on and you're helping the team get through because they've been out for 24 hours and you want everyone to get home, you're thinking about those things and seeing out what else is going on and looking at your team and how do we get better at what we do and how do we promote ourselves amongst all these other entities that are out here that could be
Mhm.
potential partners for us. So it's one thing that we're always thinking about, even in the winter. It is, listen, we're all shooting to get all the renewals done in April, right, for the winter season. The reality of it is it doesn't happen. We try to get as many as we can done. Um, but when we start to look at the best practices that SIMA's put together and the RFP timelines and things like that, we want to be ahead of the curve, but we're still having those conversations. And when people hear you talk about snow in May, in June, it's they're sweating and it's hot and it's the last thing on their mind. But most often they're appreciative of the fact that you're planning and thinking ahead of that, because
Mhm.
not just a side business for you, that you're just finding busy work for your team when the growing season's over, right? It's a
Right.
service center, it's a profit center, it's all of those things that we all do each and every day, and it's part of it's a segment of our business. So it's something that again, the marketing and the salesmanship just doesn't stop. It's something that needs to be staying for 12 months a year. So um, I never really looked at that up until probably 10 years ago, because
Mhm.
we'd get to the green season, right? And we got to
Sure.
start edging and blowing lawns and, getting the fert down and everything. So you
Yeah.
didn't have the time. But when you think about the bigger picture and you start to invest in that as a salesperson or even yourself going out as a sole proprietor and creating those other relationships and still talking snow while you're talking the green industry, people see your level of professionalism, and most often they say, you know what, that person's a real stand-up person. They're into the industry. They're talking about technology and better practices, and those are the
Mhm.
people that they want to align themselves with. And I always say, My job is to make their job easy, right? When I talk about,
Solve a problem for them, right?
right,
You're
solve,
there to solve a
what's the pain
problem for
point?
them.
I have it written right here. What's the pain point, right? Find the biggest
Mhm.
pain point for these people and be the solution for it if you can. Now, you can't always do it if somebody, has an out of this world request, but
Sure.
find the pain points, help them, find solutions, and those are the people that, you'll align with. But it's 12 months and it doesn't stop. I'm sure maybe it does for some and they have a little bit different philosophy, but it might work for some and not work for others. But I listen, I started that Blizzard and Bloom podcast because people want to talk real stuff, right? And the reality of it is we want to get renewals done and we want to get them done in March at the end of the season. We want to have the last snowstorm. We want to, job cost this thing and get a contract back out. But some of them either A, don't have their budgets put together yet for the following year, or they might work off of a different fiscal year. Maybe it's June through, May, whatever it might be. So that's something you just need to stay on top of. And to me, that's business development as well, right? It's not just sales. You're
Yep.
continuing to, you're continuing to nurture and harvest that relationship. And hopefully when they're ready, you've laid your cards out right. And you've provided really good service and no reason for them to go anywhere else. So, but to think that everybody's going to re-sign in March is, it's just
Oh,
not,
for sure. For
so,
sure.
but the best we can do is stay on top of it as sales folks so that we don't give them a reason to go anywhere else.
Excellent point. And Rob drops a good comment in here. He says relationships help, but in the last 5 to 6 years, it's all about price. And I see that. I feel it. I know with my own as a consumer and as a purchaser, hey, I would love to take that vacation, but it's not in my budget. Like, so we're gonna do this instead, or I'm gonna buy this object, or I'm not ordering the filet, I'm ordering the sirloin, whatever. It says, you can dividend the relationship and be the best value. That is huge. Talk to us a little bit, Jay, about how do you handle a situation where things still line up, right? It still seems like a good client, it's a good location, everything seems to work. Perhaps their RFP is off, and I'm baiting you here a bit because I know the answer that I want. The RFP is off, or they're just looking for a price. What are your next steps? Do you believe in, talk me through, if somebody wants, apples to apples pricing, but something else will either serve them better or save them money? How do you
Yeah.
work through that?
Yeah. First off, we always ask the question too, are we the third price? Is that what you're looking for? Just be upfront, but secondarily to that, I think there's a couple things that come into play. I think it's level of service and the contract outline. So you could maybe have something that's an all-inclusive and, have something that's, whatever it is, say it's $100,000 contract, but everything's
Or
inclusive. And again, we're all working in different worlds and then there's thresholds up to so many inches and so many salt. But I have found really since COVID, a lot of people haven't gone, some of the businesses have brought their employees back, but some haven't. So now there's a couple things, right? And then maybe some of their tenants haven't come back into some of these bigger commercial buildings.
Yep.
So they're not getting that revenue, right? So then we start to talk about, okay, what level of service are we looking to do? Is that entrance or that side of the building getting done? What we're not willing to do is we're not willing to risk our level of service for an event, right?
Sure.
We're not willing to put our tack on the line to say, hey, okay, you know what, we won't come when there's we'll come when there's 4 inches, or we won't salt until you tell us. And we don't play that game. It's not, it puts yourself out there for risk. And ultimately, we're supposed to be the folks that are preventing the risk, right? And trying to help
Right.
reduce that. So oftentimes what we've been finding here in the Northeast anyways is a lot of our precip is turning more into frozen precip. We're not getting as
Sure.
much snow. So, we could get anywhere from 70 to 90 inches of snow. Um, and now we're finding that, we're getting 30 inches, but we're getting a lot of ice and that
Mhm.
type of wet precip. So we found restructuring the contracts, and
The same contract 5 years ago is no longer serving the client.
that's
Yeah,
correct.
change it.
Right?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
when we think about some of those things, and when we start talking about price, we say, well, let's break it out. Do you want us to include X amount of salts up to, or do you want
Mhm.
us to include this and haul those piles away? Or
Mhm.
we can save you some money. but it's a risk, right? It's a gamble for you, not for us. But we won't include the snow hauling or the stacking of it, or we won't have any saltings in there. That'll be totally separate. But we have to manage the salting events. We can't have
Sure.
managing that. We're the professionals. We're trained for that, and that's what we do. That's why you partner with us, and that's why you hire us. And if they're not willing to venture down that road with you or see eye to eye with that, that right there kind of concludes that it might not be a good fit.
It's a big red flag, right? For sure. Something I would do with that A level, that top tier that I've been going after and targeting, if they wanted a apples to apples comparison, but I'm looking at the RFP and I know from my experience and from what I've seen on their job over the last whatever amount of time, it's not what they need. We can do something better. We can save them money. I would say, listen, like I can bid this apples to apples, but I'm not going to sign that contract. I'll do that so you can see where our price stacks up against the quality that you're currently getting, if that's what you want. But I'm also going to give you a bid that shows what I think, based off my experience, is going to serve you better and save you money. So they would get both together, one document. I would write the top, not a contract, will not sign. And I would highlight in bold all the services that were written in the contract, but they didn't actually get. Right? Like, how many times have you gotten a contract and you're like, this might be landscape. Oh, there's no way that turf's getting fertilized 4 times a year. I know the company's just not doing it, right? Like we've all gone against those job sites. That's how you bid against your lowest bidder, right? They're not edging before they mulch. They're not doing it, all the cleanup or whatever the detail may be. They're not, doing the cutting the snow all the way to the curb edge. All the handicap spots aren't cleared. There's excessive amounts of rock salt at the entranceway. All those things. So I would give them that, highlighting where, like, hey, this isn't done, I haven't seen this, that kind of stuff. And then here's my proposal, here's my RFP, here's where I think you should focus yourself, this is where I think you should focus your budget, put your budget here, don't put it here. And if there was really a big fish, because it takes a time investment, I give them a multi-year plan. If it was a contract that I was doing for 12 months, I would bid out the snow price and landscape price. Here's some long-term goals that we can work into your current budget, but we have to do it for 3 years. We have to do it for 5 years, right? Partner with us, become the thing. And that did two things. One, it highlighted the amazing work that my crews were doing. They could drive around town. I give job sites as examples. And then it would show that we're an expert, right? I don't want to just feed out 500 RFPs and whatever ones come in on the low bidder on I'm getting. Like that wasn't my interest. I didn't have time for that. I was very selective and focused on who we were targeting and when. And you know what? Maybe I didn't get it that year. Maybe they're still on a multi-year contract and for whatever reason it didn't go, but they had that information that seed was planted. They know that I'm an expert and I became their like partner and could just keep communication going after that. I don't know. It could be time intrusive though, for sure.
Yeah, and I think with that said, honesty gets you a lot further, right? Because why water something down when don't be that company that says you're going to do four fertilizations and you're only going to come in and really do three, and you know that going into it. You built a better business than that. Your integrity is a lot higher. But the one thing I really think about is with the whole relationship thing still. If
Yeah.
but to your point, right? You have these conversations with these folks, these property managers or clients, business owners, and you have that and say, listen, I got apples to apples, and I can't get to where probably you need to be with that dollar amount. What can we do? Can we adjust the contract so that, there's a little bit of something for everybody? We're not willing to drop price or drop
Right.
the quality of service. And sometimes if it doesn't happen, I think those true conversations with people, they come back around. So if somebody else is doing the work, they're only going to be able to do it for so long with minimal success if they've gone in there and haven't done things. And it's okay, I think, in the season, if you truly were a competitor or had a competitive bid and you're looking at some of these,
Mhm.
like I said, when you reach back out in the spring or end of the winter, it's okay to, you notice these things driving by the site, right? That weren't getting done that you planned to do, your team was going to do.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
okay, I think, to call that out and be like, hey, with all due
100%.
respect, I was planning to do this, this, and this, and it didn't get done. Had I known that, we could have just taken it out, then it'd be a different story, right?
Correct. Right. And you're doing it in a direct way, right? You're not publicly shaming and things
That's
of
right.
that nature, for
That,
sure.
that's right.
There's so many things I want to get to here. Um, let's talk about, I would call it a drop dead date. What's the importance of knowing what this is like planning out, right? So drop dead date. I have to have all my contracts in and signed by X amount of date so that operations can fill the route for it. How do you communicate that with clients, especially, like new ones? I need to sign this by. And on a extra thing is, what are your thoughts on signing incentives for earlier on? Right? Does the price go higher the closer to the start season? Do you stay consistent? I get different people do different things. So what works for you, Jay?
Yeah. Oh, good question. Loaded question. I think educating them on knowing the planning that your company takes place at. The salt, right? We got to purchase salt. We all know salt's been a challenge in the past. We got to make a commitment to the salt. So, in an effort to do that, we need commitment from others, right? So we got to plan for that. Equipment doesn't just show up at your doorstep. Sometimes it takes time. Is something coming off lease? Are you going to do a new lease? How many pieces of equipment do you need? Is there a
Mhm.
dedicated piece of equipment to a site? You get a big site and you say to these people, listen, like we have dedicated pieces of equipment and personnel here. So we need to know because we don't want to set you up for failure or us up for failure. We want to be ready because we want to be ready by October 1 so that when
Mhm.
we get a risk of a snowfall, that you're ready and your site is going to be safe. So we can talk about those timelines, but I think you need to back it up with really the actualities of why, and that it's not smoke and mirrors to them, you know.
For
So,
sure. For
um,
sure.
that's one of the things we talk about. And let's face it, it's the salt has been an issue for a lot of folks. We've worked hard to make sure we actually keep salt stored 24/7, 365. We always have piles because we don't want to run short, right? But that's an investment. And when you talk to these other people and say, hey, listen, we're going to be fine, or we're going to have this, we have the resources, make sure you can back it up at the same time, right? So when you start
Excellent
talking
points.
about those things and time frames, and they start thinking, "Wow, they really are planning. I want to get on board with this." So
Mhm.
that those are kind of some of the MOs that we're using and talking about.
So I would never do incentives on rates, right? Like my rate's my rate. Whether you sign it now, you sign it 90 days, you signed it 90 days ago, because I didn't want to provide that opportunity for wishy-washy. I didn't want a client to come back to me and be like, well, you said you could do it then. I'm only going to sign if you still do it. I never wanted to do that. But incentives were valuable for the clients that I was working in. Hey, if you sign by this date, I'll credit you a work order for a type of work that's very profitable for my company, or I'll make sure that your mulch is done by this time, or flowers are done by this time, or we'll, your site will be staked, or like whatever I could use as a bargaining tool. If it was a high-end hotel, they were really big into their seasonal displays. So I would use that to my advantage. Things that didn't affect our profit margins, but would still be an incentive to clients too. And then when they come to you in the last minute, like, hey, that's great. I'm so glad we're signing. We do actually still have availability, luckily, but you're now scheduled here. Great. If you would have signed then, I could have done something else. And this
Sure.
was a cat and mouse dance a bit with operations and planning too, right? Like, are you doing first sign, first work done? No, you're taking care of your key clients. You're going to do those things, but just trying to use those conversations to your advantage a little bit.
Yeah, we
Um,
we don't have really much. We don't work in that facet too often with the incentivize and um,
sure.
But it's different for everybody, right? It just
Yeah.
depends on what your model is. But in our minds, it's hey, if you find the value, we're going to make sure we'll back it up, and you're not going to have any worries. And we're going to make sure you have an account manager. We're going to walk the property with the entire team. We're bringing the operators in. They have, maybe they work and doing construction in the winter, and they work for us or in the summer. They work for us in the winter, or I don't know, could be a multitude of things, right? But we're going to come walk the site, and these are your guys, gals. This is your team right here. So if there's questions, everybody's gonna know. Everybody's gonna see. We have the maps drawn out, color coded. We've gone over everything with everyone. So again, one of our things is you've got one point of contact. So you have a problem. You don't have to call the 800 number or the 24-hour hotline. You're going to call this number, and your account manager or site manager is going to pick up the phone, and then
Mhm,
they're going to be checking in as well. So
for sure. Talk to me about your philosophy on cold calling. What does that look like? How do you do it? Is it walking in the door? Is it sending a LinkedIn message? Is it a phone call, an email? Give me your elevator speech on cold calling and how you handle it.
Yeah, cold calling, we don't blanket again, we don't blanket cold call, but I do believe there's something to be said about cold calling. And it takes, for every 20 calls you make, you're going to probably get 2 to 3 that are going to be receptive and want to chat with you. But again, we're 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 intentional in what we do, and I'm not saying anybody else isn't. We've found a way, methods that work for us. And part of the cold calling is, reaching out to them via phone, but also stopping in and saying, "Hey," because people want to see a face, right? The other thing I've been
Yes,
doing is
yes.
video emailing. So I'll set a video. I do a video and I make it personable. So, hey, this is Jay. Look, wanted to see if I could get some time with you. We've been watching your site and see what the company does, and I'll put that into an email. The worst thing that you can probably do is utilize LinkedIn to peg people and ask them for a friend request, and then 2 seconds later say, "Hey, is there any chance we could get together?" And because there's no value to them. So, and you see that often with social media, right? You got to bring value to that person. So I might stop in and then you got to go through the gatekeeper, right? Who's the young lady or the young gentleman or sitting at the front desk? And when they say, "Hey, can I help you?" Say, "Yeah, I was just wondering if I could speak to your operations manager." And if you do your homework, say, "I know John is typically here during the day," and you make it a little bit more like you've got some information, you did your homework, you're going to be more
Uh,
to be able to get in. And sometimes we'll go with little things. I've got some Piscataqua Yeti mugs, and I'll stop and I'll say, "You know what? I can give you my card, but here's a mug, and keep me in mind. And if there's something we can do," or they might say, "Hey, I was just thinking about, we need to make some changes, or we need to look at this." But nothing beats FaceTime with people when you
yes.
stop in. So can it be a little intimidating or scary or rejection at times? Sure. But I'll tell you, once you get rejected once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 10 times, it feels the same.
Get over it.
It's what you do, right? It's what we do. But
Yep.
I'm careful
Yep.
with the way with our approach utilizing LinkedIn as a platform because people get very offended by that and they don't want their time wasted.
For sure. Yeah, use it as a tool. Use it to figure out who's a decision maker or who may be a facility manager. And I would say in certain job sites, it's not just one person you want to reach out to and contact, right? There's the accountant person, the books individual that's coming down to the just looking at the final bids. There's the facility person who's your operations are going to be talking to nonstop and working with. There's the property manager, the front office, like there could be 4 or 5 different people you have to cold call in order to get your foot in the door that first time.
Yeah. And you
Um,
make a good point, right? So
yeah,
certainly you want that person that signs the contracts, right? That's ideally who you want to get to, but you better darn well be making relationships with the people who you're going to be dealing with on a regular basis because again, if you can make their job easy and you grow, you can gain a level of comfort with those folks and a level
mhm,
of trust. There is influence there. So
sure.
undoubtedly. Now, is it, 100%? Maybe not. But
Mhm,
most of those people in the upper end, if they're not penny pinching, they're looking and saying, "Hey, Joe's got to do his job right. Like, let's get him somebody that's going to take care of the facility." Or Joe seems to like this guy, and I think he can work well with them because if they don't work out, it sounds like Joe has no problem letting them know either. So those are
sure.
the things you need to think about from a FaceTime perspective as well. So that was a good point, Amanda. Like it's not just about that one person that
Mhm.
signs the contract, right? It's about creating those bridges and working with those different influencers.
So you've made the phone call. You've gotten somebody to open the door to you. You're able to have a conversation with you. I would never ask somebody like, "Hey, I'm so glad you're here. I called you. Can we do a site walk?" No, site walks, to my opinion, site walks need to be given dedicated time, planning. You want to make sure the weather's decent. I shined when I could get a client to do a site walk with me, right? Hey, I know you're very busy. Within the next 2 weeks, do you have 45 minutes where we could grab a cup of coffee and do a site walk together? I'd like to hear about your pain points and what's a priority to you. And I want to kind of talk to you a bit about how I see us staging this job site. If I can get them to agree to that, I was like, I got the contracts. Okay, we'll sign that. Like, we're good. You know, then it's just working out the details at that point in time. But that was a big step and a big leverage for me. And I would say at that point, is there anyone else that we should be including in this conversation? Right? You know, who in your company organization signs a contract? Who would my client be? Like, who are your facilities people? You know, is there anyone else we should get their perspective on? I'll share a story. I had a client who owned a large shopping center in the area. They didn't live here. Very common, at least where I live, very common. But he has a facility guy that comes up once every 2 months to check on things. And he has a local electrician that he really uses regularly and trusts greatly. My first meeting was with the local electrician. It was what they asked me to do. It was fine. He just wanted someone to vet me, to vet what I was saying, that I was credible, right? And it was fine. I was like, that's fantastic. I got a whole electrician. Next time he was on site servicing the parking lot lights, I met him there. You know, he's walking the timers. I just talked to him a little bit, introduced his own, told us who our contract is, you know, who our company is and what we're looking to do. And he's like, I think it would be a good fit for Joe. I'll let him know. And then, you know, next time he came up on a facility tour, then he met with me and then we went through it. Yes, they were under contract, nothing we could do at that point in time, but we're setting the seeds for that future growth. Sometimes it's that trickle effect and it can be
Yeah.
slow, but it's helpful.
Yeah. And the differentiators, right? Like what makes you different from, so first off, yes, don't ever expect you're going to go in and see somebody and they're going to drop it because
Yeah.
everybody's busy, right? That'd be no different than somebody calling us and be like, hey, I'm going to take up an hour of your time.
Mhm.
Really care what you had going. So, but when you can create that and get to their level and work within their time frame, right? You've already started to create a sense of trust and respect there. And it's funny you say that. I mean, how often all of us come across other subcontractors that are doing work on these properties, right? That are nationally owned or they don't have a local representative.
Yep.
So, you know, when you create those relationships, you start to differentiate who you are as well compared to maybe
Mhm.
who the competitor is, right? And you start to differentiate by, you know, whether you can help assist with that electrician, you can, you know, so one of your team can let him into the building. If their rep
Mhm.
isn't there, you know, now next thing you know, you're helping them in other facets besides being their just snow removal contractor, right? You're a person of
Sure.
trust that they've built that with. So I think there's a lot to be said about that.
Talk to me about your property walkthrough. What points are you talking about? What vehicle are you driving? Where are you parking? What are you wearing? What questions are you asking? Individuals that don't do business development or been from it a long time, these are things they don't know, or like that could potentially have an influence. What are your thoughts on any of that? Any advice?
Yeah, I think it's a, you know, safety is a big thing for us, much like it is with everyone. I'm sure everybody on this call, but you know, when we show up, we've got our fluorescent vests on and we're getting out there and we've got a clipboard. You know, I often now will use my phone and do voice notes. And it was funny when I first started that, I'd have to say to people, I'm not texting anybody. I'm making notes here, right? So
Mhm.
we show up and we're prepared, you know, we can start to educate them on the things we're looking for. Like where are the critical areas? Where are the ramps? Where are the handicap areas? Where is their poor drainage? Where's the sun? Where's the sun come up? How's the sun go down? What's that effect? What's the snow on the roofs look like? Where's that draining down through the drains? Um, you know, where can we stage equipment? You know, what are the hours here? I see, you know, there's somebody that's here at 5 a.m. and but yet there's another, they close at 6, but there's another place open until 11. So you start to identify all of those things and then also pick up on what the pain points. And to your point, you know, when you're walking through, you'd say, boy, I'm seeing this as an issue. I'm going to make a note of that. Was that an issue before? How did they, you know, I would handle it like this. Did they handle it in the same way? You know, was it successful? Did it work for you? And matter of fact, it wasn't. I always had to call them, you know, I don't know why they couldn't see that low spot and it pooled with, you know, with water all the time. You know, and then maybe
Mhm.
that's a conversation of, hey, you know, would you be interested in having us take a look at that from a construction standpoint? You know, we can cut that out and adjust the grades, or we can fix that catch basin and help to correct those measures instead of just it being there and it's just a continual problem, you know, all the way through. So it's about finding solutions for them. And the solution isn't always just about where you're going to put the snow.
Yeah. For sure. I'll say it one more time for the cheap seats. Solve a problem for them, right? You need to be solving a problem for them. That's kind of my whole basis on it. And I think also, it's okay at that point, that conversation, that's when you are talking about quality. You're seeing past damages, you're seeing curb edges that are busted and lifted up, you're seeing salt damage to concrete. Have that conversation. That's a pain point. One, it happened. Two, it's not fixed yet. Like what's going on that? And then how does your company handle that? Right? What would you do differently? How would you handle that situation?
It's
And
things like
document
that,
all
right?
that.
It's about, and that's where the technology comes in and having
Mhm.
us all as professionals, industry professionals, stay above it. Like, we're using curb guards on the blades, on the plows, right? So that we're not breaking up concrete curbs. And we have a lot of granite up here, as you can imagine, in New Hampshire and Maine and Massachusetts. But still, you can be chipping and causing a lot of damage. So again, as simplistic as it may sound, put curb guards on your plow. If you know you're doing those sidewalks, or maybe it's a different piece of equipment that's going up close to the sidewalks and pushing it out. So different things to your point. And we're big on getting snow warranty stuff done ASAP. And I always say you're only as good as the last time you left it with them. So if you didn't show up for the last snowstorm, but you killed it every other storm, you're a bad guy. And they're never going to forget it, right? Because come next snow season or when they want to sign, or, with their curbs and they're all damaged and they're, up in the air and the parking lot islands are terrible. If those are still sitting like that in May and June, man, that doesn't set a good image. And they don't forget those things. So
For
when you're
sure.
there and you're sending them notes saying, "Hey, we went back, we did we're looking back at our site audit pictures that we took in the fall or the end of the summer, and this is what we came across. We do believe this was some of ours, so we're going to go ahead and take care of this. I just want to make you aware of it, and then hopefully at some point we can walk the property again. But I have the pictures from everything, so that's a great piece of, or that's a great tool as well, because you also don't want to get caught doing, repairing somebody else's damage or be on the hook for that, right? So
Right.
when
For
you
sure.
think,
Document all that.
absolutely. So because sometimes those things don't get done, and the next thing you know, you've taken over a property and it becomes your problem. So documenting is super critical.
Sure. Let's hear for others. I want to be respectful of time. As you guys all know, I love sales. This is my all-time favorite subject and relationship building and business development. It's just what I love. So I could go on, but you don't want to hear from me. What's going on with individuals? Rob, Bob, Jeremy, if any of you guys want to come off mute and talk a little bit about what your company does, best practices, things that you've found successful, or questions that you might have for Jay or the group.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from somebody, because I mean, we're not perfect at Piscataqua, so this is a great platform to kind of talk about some things that are successful for others.
Yeah. And if you're not comfortable, that's perfectly fine too. I certainly understand. Oh, I think Rob may have. Oh no, he's in freeze. I thought he was going to say something, but
Hey,
that's
there he is. Hey,
How
buddy,
are we, Jay? How are we, Amanda?
how are you?
excellent, sir.
Good,
Thank you.
good. Hope everybody's doing well here. It's finally feels like summer, you know?
Oh, yeah, yeah, for sure.
I think that is all great information. I think the solving problem part that Amanda keeps referencing is big for us. We're a very, very relationship heavy business. I think that's been part of our struggle for any more growth is, that's how it's been built. It's all relationships, and for the customer base that we have, it's they don't they just want you to solve their problem. That's it. And I think that, as we, begin to build our customer base, that's a part of our whole sales platform is, that's number one, solve the problem. So, I mean, I don't have too much to add to it. I'll be honest. That is a big struggle of ours. That's why I joined this group. When we don't really have a dedicated sales team or a salesperson. Sometimes I question how we've been able to do what we've done.
It's a big jump in investment for a company to have a dedicated salesperson, right? Because it's
Yeah,
just straight overhead.
yeah, and we
Yeah.
tried it and I failed at it, and I pretty much, I am the salesperson, business development, and it's we're actively looking for someone. I'm also trying to see what I can do with AI. That's, I've decided in the past month that I'm not going to look back. I'll be 40 this year. I'm not going to look back at 50 and say, man, I wish I would have done more with AI. So, huge drive for me right now because it's hard. It's,
Huge benefit in sales.
yeah, and
Yeah.
we've got an intricate business and I'm just trying to simplify it. And I don't want to bring someone else in and not be successful with it. So, yeah, I mean, I think the principles as a whole, everything Jay, you talked about, and I mean, we've had, conversations about it. I think it's, the principles are all the same. It really doesn't matter, with the business. I agree with what Bob's saying with, it has become, cost over that relationship thing. There's more people out there that just strictly care about the cost, more so than that relationship. But that's the goal, at least for us, is to find those customers. I'd rather keep it smaller and have the right customer than we all have had, horrible customers. And why? What's it? All it does is make you more stressed out.
Listen, I think
Seriously.
what you've built and your ability to be able to have that much growth and really just yourself. And I know Lindsay's a big part of it as well, but I mean that's huge to it. And listen, nobody does it as well as the owner, or in their mind and their philosophies. That's hard. That's hard to hand down to somebody and give somebody that trust, right? Because you've spent so long building up your brand and now you're putting it in the trust of somebody else.
Yep.
You can only hope that when they're out there seeing these clients, that they're not putting their foot in their mouth, that they're not overpromising something, that they're talking, reality about who you are and what RPM represents. And so there's all those things, right? It's a scary move. I
It
know
is.
for us, we have a bunch of sales folks now, but it's scary every time I hire one. I'm like, it, it takes me a long time to find a really good fit for a salesperson because I I don't want them to know the industry completely, to be quite honest with you. I want to know that they're a really good person and that they're gonna do the right thing in all the right situations. And that's who you want to align yourself with. So, it's scary, it's hard. So, but again, kudos to you for, the growth that you have been able to do. And, hopefully you get to a point where you can be working more on your business and can download some of those strategies, to somebody else. So.
Yeah, we're picking at it. A couple of our managers, because we're a lot contract based, so it's more order taking than sales, and that's something I've learned of late. There really is, all I'm doing on a daily basis is order taking, and yeah, we're keeping that going and it's still a level of business development, but from a going out and finding new customers to an order taking part where you're just catering to that customer and you have specific types of contracts, snow or other facets. It's a different world, and I've lived in the order taking world for 20 years, not that sales world. And I can't expect to bring someone in to something that I don't really know. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I got to really learn it if I want to be successful at it, or anybody. I think that goes for, for all types of business owners. I don't know. That's my philosophy. If you're going to put somebody else out there to do it, you better know how
Rob,
to
you
do
just gave
it.
me my next subject. Our next topic is going
I'm
to
down.
be,
Let's go.
managing how to manage a sales team. I run our executive peer group, and they're a great group. I really enjoy that interaction I have, and they often ask me like, well, what would you hire a salesperson? What would their starting salary be? What would you pay? What would you this? How do you manage that? And I say it's a unique role. It's a bit of a unicorn because if they are just chill hungry, if they just want to get the highest salary, they're not going to be in this industry, right? Like they're going to go somewhere else. They have to love this industry to start with. They have to be a high standard, good quality person. And I've heard multiple coaches say, I'll take will over skill, get somebody with that meets, I think, your culture the best, and then teach them up, coach them up on the things that you're looking for and what you want. But as far as like that trust, there's a big part from the salesperson. They have to be proactive, reporting back to the group, to the management team with what their status is, right? I've made these contacts, I'm looking for these people, these are my high priorities, this is what I'm going after. This is what I need help with. I can't get a foot in the door at this location. It's a priority for us. Who knows somebody that's connected here? Like who lives close by, who like can give me some inside knowledge on it, use your whole team to help you with your sales growth on that kind of stuff when you're being first selective and targeting. And I think it's a big jump for any company, to go from those inbound sales versus outbound. Outbound sales is a totally different game and it's different.
And I think that's great points. I think two things to that. You know, COVID made it easy for people to sell work because people were buying it. Times were good. And I say this to my team all the time, and I say it in a tongue-in-cheek way, but we're coming into an economy now, or an economy where true salespeople are going to shine. And if you're not a true salesperson, and you're not the CEO like Rob, and you're just somebody that's out there and in a sales position, and you're just order taking, hang on, because you know there's an
They get
old
ugly.
adage, and I firmly believe this: people do business with people they like,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
When you find a great person, smiley face, or somebody that you feel comfortable with, and you feel like they're not there to just take your wallet out of your back pocket, those are the people. And again, people do business with people they like, and I'm a firm believer in that.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that.
Bob, share with us. What do you got, friend?
People do business with people they like as long as the price is right. It's
Sure.
unfortunate, but that's what it's become. And in the last 4 years, the price has become the absolute lowest common denominator. And you can have I said it before, you can have a relationship and you can be the best value, which is where you need to go and probably the lane you need to stay in. But I'm getting killed on prices. And I'm a small company. I'm less than 1 million. And it's me and an office clerk. And, I'm lucky. We've sold most of ours has already been renewed for winter. I lost a big customer, not because I did anything wrong. The contract was sold, and that company the aggregator I was working for, is no longer has the contract. For me, it's a significant amount of money. It's 250 grand. But, I hired subcontractors to do it for the majority of it. I'm only was exercising probably 50 grand at the end of the year. That was mine. So now I have to find another thing. But the cold calling is what we're going after. And it is, you're right. I'm at one spot. I'm going cold calling all the other businesses next door because I have a large machine. I have a big pusher. We're very efficient. I can start selling that other work before I could work. And it is cold calling. But
Yeah.
bring an email introduction and then showing up with a face. I'm not big enough to bring gifts, but I do bring a smile and and some cheer, and sometimes it works. But
Sure.
most of what I'm finding is a lot of these older businesses have people that are plowing their snow, and they've been doing it for 100 years. I'm exaggerating, but their pricing is still in the 1980s.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that. There are some.
And in New England, that's how it works. You know, and sometimes you just can't come close to that. And you're right, it is good to say no sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it's just not a good fit and it's frustrating and I don't like to see anyone fail. But unfortunately, sometimes, if people are going to go in there and they're going to do it for half the price or 30% less, then, how can they you as a business owner know your true cost? But getting back to what you were saying, you know, if you have these businesses here on either end, you've got two other ones that you'd like to have in the middle, you use that to your advantage. Be like, hey, listen, you can go talk to so and so. We have a great relationship. They're thrilled, and we're re-signing with them year after year. We're very fair on our pricing, but there's a cost associated with that. To have a safe, good-looking operation.
I have a site, it's a 24-hour day, it's an industrial commercial site, 350 trucks out of there every day. We are black and wet within hours. I mean, we've got a couple dedicated pieces, we have dedicated crew. And people have said, we want what they got. And when I give them the price, they go, well, you're about double what we pay. And I'm like, okay. and then they hire somebody who doesn't even do the things, and we were talking about it earlier, the scope of work. I can bid the
Yep.
scope of work, you can bid the scope of work, and then the other guy comes in, cuts our price in half, and that scope of work doesn't even get followed. And I've said to managers, I'm like, if that was really what you wanted, that's what you should have told us, because I could have done that for the same price or probably a little bit less if that's all I had to do. But you asked for this. You asked for apples, you took pears. And that's the frustrating part.
Yeah.
It's
And
unfortunate.
yeah. And at the end of the day, it's hard to change, right? Until a new regime comes in, you get a new property manager or somebody else is in that seat, because until then, they're going to always look at it that way, unless you have a really compelling reason, to prove to them. So some of these people, it's all about the bottom line that they have to show to their boss, or that affects their, ultimately forgets, their compensation, right? And reflects on them if they're saving money and, but the fact of the matter is, I know we have one right now. He said, I used to be up all night because I'd have to call this guy. I just knew it. Every time I'd have to call. And he goes, it was so frustrating because I couldn't even sleep. My wife was so irritated. He goes, now, he goes, I don't have to call you guys. I said, we made that promise and we made good on it. And we were sure you gave us a chance. And I said, our job is to make your job easy. Our job is to take care of that service sector. That's not your job. But it took time and it took trust. And to your point, Bob, there's going to be some that unfortunately aren't going to find that value in it. And how many times do you beat that door down before it's like, no, I've got to move on because I'm not going to get anywhere with these folks. And it is frustrating. It is frustrating.
Jay, what does your follow-up look a little bit? You made a cold call, you made a contact, it's kind of gone dry, what's your next step? How much do you follow up? How often? What type of follow-ups do you do?
Yeah. Depends how bad I want it.
Yeah.
Right. For all of us. But oftentimes I'll show up and, I have, I'll dig a little deep to understand when they're going to be there or when they're not, or where they might be, or if it's a sunny day and I know they're going to be outside, or they got a project going, that they're fixing the whatever, the loading docks. I'll wheel in and then, hopefully see them put the window down. Hey, how are you? Just checking in. And,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
sometimes I'll do that. I don't, we get to a point, if the answer is, get back to me, I got to think about this, or I'm okay right now, I'm happy for this. Usually we'll say, you know what, I'm going to follow up with him in a month or 2 months. I'm not going to follow up every week with him, because then you just become a nuisance at that point. And then you've taken what you were farming as a good relationship, and now you've become somebody who the guy doesn't even, he can't stand to see you anymore because he's so busy with other things. So I think there's
Sure.
balance there. It just depends on who that person is and how you've started off the relationship with. If it's been a very cold
Mhm.
experience from the get-go, we don't put as much effort in. But if it's somebody that's like,
Yeah.
I want to talk more, I want to give it a try, I want to see what we can do, those are the ones that we'll put more effort into nurturing that, and more frequently. I don't have the timeline for that because it's kind of different for every person, but those are the ones that we're staying on top of.
Mhm. For sure. People have busy seasons as well, and you have to kind of be respectful of that.
Yeah.
I found one of my most effective follow-ups, and again, it's time consuming. So this is when being a dedicated salesperson is beneficial. Was a handwritten thank you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you meeting me in your lobby, the 5 minutes, the half-hour walk, whatever it was. Short note, handwritten. Thank you so much for your time. I recognize that you're busy. I'll be in touch in about a month and looking forward to learning more about what your needs are, how we can partner, whatever. But phone calls, emails, like you try different avenues, different things work for different people. Sometimes a handwritten note, especially if it was a older generation property manager client, went a really long way.
That's a personal touch, right?
Mhm.
That's another touch. An email, in my mind, an email, a phone call, those aren't touches. Those aren't personal touches, right? It's the follow-up, stopping in there, and it takes time out of your day, right? Be your sole proprietor
Mhm.
like Bob, or and Rob's doing his own thing. Like, it takes time out of your day. You got to find the time to do that,
For
right? But
sure.
you don't want to waste your time and just drive around and hope these people are available. So I think that personal touch and a follow-up with a nice card that just says, hey, thanks for your time. If nothing else,
Mhm.
keep me in mind. I just want to let you know, I just want to thank you for your time because
Yep.
I know you're busy as well. So I think that goes a long ways.
We are over an hour and we can certainly keep talking. I don't want to cut anybody off, but I do want to be respectful of time. Does anybody have any last questions or things they want to share or anything that way? Going once, going twice.
Great. I'll tell you, thanks for having me on today and thanks for being a part of the group. But, no matter, I've been doing this 36 years and, I just feel like I can learn something new every time I sit with a group of folks like this. Rob and I had ability to spend some time in February with Martin on a retreat, and man, I learned so much, and it was just refreshing. And I came back and I had some. I didn't come back and try to change the world at Piscataqua, but I came back and I had some new ideas, and I was invigorated, And so again, having these group discussions or peer groups of this I think brings a ton of value. It takes time out of your day to do this, but and there's always little nuggets of information I think that you can gain from it.
All
So,
about the nuggets.
all about the nuggets, right?
Jay, if people want to get in touch with you, I know you're on a number of social medias. Again, your podcast is phenomenal. If individuals aren't listening to the Blizzard and Bloom, but any other way they can reach out to you, connect with you further?
Yeah, I mean, email is jrotonnelli at piscataqualandscaping.com. Got Facebook, LinkedIn. So any
We'll
of
find
them.
you.
And I'm always happy to help. If somebody wants to run something by me, or maybe I'll be reaching out to you to run something by you. Also, that's why I love what we do in this industry and how we can work as a group to help one another. So again, thanks for having me on. I've got some great guests coming on the podcast coming up. I got to get Robbie out, and I know he's busy, so I haven't. I'm gonna have to probably call Lindsay to book a time with him, but
I'm good.
we'll make
Slowing
it.
down a little bit. Just
Well, yeah,
gotta keep moving.
a lot of respect for everybody out there that's on this call. So glad to be a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. I really appreciate your time. I have a few parting words for individuals in sales. It can be exhausting. It can really drain your cup, especially if you're getting no's and, more than yeses kind of thing. It happens. Make sure you're, doing the things on the backside that you're still finding joy in the work and you're enjoying it, because that's really what's important in life. If you're not enjoying the process and the work that you're doing, do something else, but make sure you're filling your cup and make sure your team's filling your cup, that you feel supported and that you're supporting your team. It's really important when you're a sales role that you have the buy-in into the mission of the company.
Absolutely.
Cool.
So,
Thank you, guys. If I can be of assistance to anybody ever, reach me, Amanda@SIMA.org, and I will send this recording out to everybody. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the
Okay,
green
guys.
season and stay
thanks
safe.
everyone. Have a great afternoon.
See you later. Bye.